Right, welcome to the shed build here. Just as an intro, this isn't a step-by-step guide for every single piece of the shed. This is mostly just I filmed my process of building my shed for myself, kind of as a fun little documentation project as I went along, as I worked on it with my son. And so we decided to put it up on YouTube as there's several time lapses throughout, and I kind of go through and explain my method. I'm just an amateur do-it-yourselfer here and just kind of am building a shed. I'm not using any set of plans, but I did a little bit of research and watched some videos on my own that were helpful before I got started. So I figured I'd kind of show my process and learn from a few of the mistakes I made on my shed along the way. So anyway, hope you enjoy the series and let's get started. So I'm just going to start this little series out with a quick graphic of what we're going to be building. So, or at least what I'm going to be building here, and that is a 12 by 16 shed. So you can see here from my floor plan, this is kind of the idea I have for the shed. I have a window here, and then some two double doors here. And it's going to be 16 feet along this edge and 12 feet along this edge. And it's going to be, in my case, raised off the floor. So I'm going to build a full floor into it. So let's just take a look at the 3D view here that I put together to kind of illustrate this before the process happens. So there's kind of a couple of ideas as far as your foundation goes, and I opted to use these little concrete piers for my foundation. So they're kind of this pyramid shape. The ones that I ended up going with are, they actually have little metal brackets. So this little top plate right here will fasten directly into these 4x4s, and I ended up going with 9 of these. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then these boards here are my 16-foot boards. So there's 1, 2, 3. Those are the skids that sit on top of those piers. And then I build my floor on top of those. So my floor, in my case, I use 2x4 framing, but I have a 2x4 that runs lengthwise this way. I guess this is crosswise. Every 16 inches on center, where I ended up doing my floor. And then my plywood on top of that floor. So this is the basic layout. So you can kind of visualize before we get started here just exactly how my shed's going to be. Now, of course, this is just a simple little model here. My roof is going to be shingled. I ended up doing 2x6s for my trusses. I originally, you'll see in my videos, had planned to do a 2x4 roof trusses system, but I ended up going with the 2x6. So one of the issues I ran into is when I cut my wall height, my paneling here, I ended up cutting it as if I was going to be a 2x4 frame. So there's a little gap that I filled in later with the under edge for sort of that soffit stuff. I do have a little bit of overhang on my final shed. You can see this is just straight up, but I ended up going with about a 3.5 inch overhang on each side there, and then really no overhang here on the gable ends. It's just really the rain drip edge, I suppose, and it overlaps about maybe an inch is all, and then the trim is up there as well. So that's kind of what it looks like. Now the reason I decided to use these piers is I did want my shed up off the ground. I'm going to be building my shed over where I have a piece of lawn, so I ended up burying them, however, about 3/4 of the way, because I didn't want my shed to sit on top of these big 10-inch piers and then the 4x4 skid and then the 3.5 inch 2x4 floor. You know, I didn't want it to be a 1.5 feet up to step up into the shed, so I buried these piers about 3/4 of the way. You'll see that in the video here in a minute once we get going, but I ended up burying those. That brought the height of my overall shed down. The reason why you want to probably build these guys up on these piers is because it leaves an air gap underneath your shed, and no moisture is going to be able to get up here and rot out any of your wood. If you do have treated lumber, my 4x4 skids are treated in the end, and if you do have treated lumber, you can actually set that right on grade. You can set that on typically a gravel, so people will build gravel and set that right on, or if you can pour a cement pad, of course, that's probably the best. But this is the way I opted to do mine, and it turned out pretty well. So just wanted to show you that quick sort of 3D render so you can get an idea of exactly what it's going to look like in the end. And let's go ahead and get started with step 1. So this is my starting point, just a quick picture that I snapped here. I actually didn't take any videos or time lapses, but this is what it looked like before I got started. All right, first step here in the building the shed series. You can see here that I have cut out a little section here. I actually rented a sod cutter from the big box store and came in here and cut out this section of sod. So my shed is going to be a 12 by 16. It's going to go right in this area. And right back there, I cut out a little piece where I'm eventually going to put some gravel and park a lawnmower or something else besides there. You can see here I've got a few of these cement piers. These are just cinder block piers. This is what I'm going to be using for the foundation for the shed. I'll go over more details about that here in a minute. I just wanted to show you the starting position here, and then we'll go to a few different options on how to build the foundations and the option I'm finally opting for. A couple things to consider when you're doing your foundation work is if you have a lot of moisture, rain in your area, you probably actually want to put down a water barrier, some plastic, and then maybe even on top of that 4 inches of gravel to help some of that moisture. I'm kind of in a desert, more of a desert climate here, so I don't need to worry as much about that. Also, you'll definitely want to check your local city for your building code. You can see there's a fence line right over there. This is the side of my house. My local code calls for a 10-foot setback, so I have to be 10 feet away from that fence where my shed goes. For my particular city, they don't require a building permit for structures under 200 square feet. So my shed's just going to be a little bit under that by 12 by 16, so I actually don't need a building permit, but you do still need to worry about local code as far as setbacks and things like that. So I'll always double check that. Also, some areas, depending on your area for structures, may require your footings, instead of using these cement blocks like I'm using, they actually might require you to dig down post holes and do a cement buried below the frost line, like a 2-foot post hole. So anyway, I'll look at a couple of the other options for your foundations here in a minute, but this is my starting point, and from here I'll go through each step of the process. I'm going to be building a 12 by 16 shed, and I'm going to kind of make it up a little bit as I go. I'm not following any sets of plans or anything like that. I'm just kind of a little amateur do-it-yourselfer. So here is my process. Hopefully you can learn a few things from the video and pick up a few ideas maybe on your own and learn from my mistakes as we go. All right, thanks. Getting ready to set my first corner here. So I've kind of already measured away from the edge of my fence up there to 16 feet, a little bit longer, so I have a little bit of room to work over there. But I'm going to set my first cornerstone and then measure and mark everything off of this one. So I've dug down. I'm going to actually set these piers fairly low, and the reason why is because I don't want them sticking out. I don't want to build my shed to where it sticks up too high, because I've got this little cement patio here, and my entrance is going to be on this side, so I don't want it to stick up terribly high when I walk into the shed. Plus, I'm kind of digging down a little bit in here to set my cornerstones down in here. So I'm going to set all 4 corners, and then I'll do the middle pieces here in a second. But you can see I've dug down. I'm pouring some river rock gravel inside of there. 4 inches is decent, so I've got gravel in there as a base that just helps with water if it condenses down there when it freezes, so it won't lift and raise the shed. The gravel helps when the water expands with freezing. And I've got some pea gravel here I'm going to pour inside of there to help me level these. So I'm actually going to level each of my piers in place, which is a little bit harder. It's a little bit easier if you just build the wood on top of your piers here. So you can come in here and just, build wood out right there and then level it off that. But I'm going to run my skids along these, so I'm actually going to have to level them in place. So I'll get the first one and the second one set and show you how that's going. All right, here's all my piers set. So I've got 9 piers. I dug, as I mentioned, holes down in the ground because I wanted to sort of recess these things down in. I've got my gravel in there, and I'll backfill that with dirt. Once I get my skids set on these, I'll level everything up. They're all pretty level right now, but it definitely would probably be a little bit easier if you're going to bury them like this, just to do concrete set inside of there. Typically these are used just for on grade, right on your ground level, for decks and whatnot, but they served my purpose with a little extra work. So there's that. All right, wood got delivered today, so another quick update here. We got all 9 of my piers sort of buried down there. Again, the reason why I buried them so deep is I didn't want my shed to sit way up in the air, so I've got you know, just an inch or so clearance. Underneath my skids there, those skids are pressure treated, that's why they're brown, so that they'll be a little bit better for weather resistant. Now when I level, this corner down here is a little bit off, so I'm just going to show you. So I can shim underneath this guy if I can get under here and show you. So to get level, you can see I can easily pop that up, and I can just put some shims underneath there to level up all the sides here if I need to. So make sure you use weather resistant shims if you're going to be doing that as well, made out of the same pressure treated stuff. But there's my piers, and then I'm going to start building the floor. These are just 2x12s because my shed is 12x16, so these will run the entire length all the way over there. When you're doing your floor, you want to make sure that you lay out your 2x4s or 2x6s, whatever you're building your floor out of. Alright, when you're laying down your floor beams here, you want to make sure that you have crown side up. What that means, there's a bow in every board, and you want the bow to be up so that as your floor sags, it will level itself out. So I'm going to try to get the camera down here and show you. So you turn your boards like this, you look down them like this, and you can see that this bow's in. So it kind of is an inward bow. We want that side down. Watch what happens when I flip this board over. I kind of pulled one that was pretty bad here to try to show you this. And you can see how that bows up. So you just look down the board and you can see which side it bows up or down. And then you want that crown up. So that board should be laid like that. The reason being is that as it sags, as your floor sags, you know, that bow will slowly get pushed out of the middle there. So you need to look down all your 2x4s, make sure you have, or 2x6s, whatever your floor is made out of, make sure you have crown side up. And then once you have all those laid out, we'll start fastening it together. Okay, this is just a little time lapse here to speed things up a little bit. So I've laid out all my 12-foot 2x4s across my skids there, and I'm just going along here with a speed square on the end, and I marked 3 inches on each of these boards right here because I'm going to cut off 3 inches so that they can get back to their 12-foot lengths. So just zipping those off, and then you can see I'm putting all the crowns up here so they fit back together. Right, just a couple quick things here. So I've got all the boards, all my 12-footers laid out across the skids there. Skids are leveled and sitting on those piers, cement piers. Now I've come through, you can see I've cut off 3 inches on every single one of my 12-foot boards. And the reason for that being is there's going to be these end plates here. So, you know, if you can imagine one of these on the other side as well. So that's 1.5 inches. There's going to be one on the other side. So I want my overall to be exactly 12 feet. So I cut off 3 inches on those 12-foot 2x4s right here, so that with these 2 end plates, one on this side, butted up tight there, and one on the other side up there, it'll be back to exactly 12 feet. And that way my sheeting will fit nice. My tongue and groove floor that's going to go on here, that OSB comes in 4x8 sheets. So it'll fit exactly 12 feet by 16 feet. Just another quick thing here, when you're doing your end pieces here, you want to do 16-inch centers. So there's 16, so I'm going to center a 2x4 floor joist, I guess we could call those, right there. So there's going to be one right there. It's going to be another one on 32, and then there's going to be, and the last one here will be right on 48. And the 48 one is really the important one. You need to make sure that lands right on 4 feet, because when you're doing your OSB, they come in 4x8 sheets, and they're going to, you know, lay your floor or plywood, whatever you're doing, clear across the floor, and you want it butt up right against the edge. So the 4 feet needs to come over and split the difference on this floor joist, so that one of your sheets will, you know, kind of be from here over halfway, and the other sheet will start halfway over and go there, so there's something to hold on. So definitely make sure that your 4-foot mark is right in the middle of that 2x4 floor joist thing there. Same thing with 8 feet and 12 feet when you're measuring those off. Another little quick thing you can see on these little piers that I use for my my footings, if you will, they've got these 4 screws. So I'm going to screw into these to tie that skid, that 4x4 pressure treated skid, all the way in. And you'll want to use galvanized screws or some sort of pressure treated screw, coated screw there. They say that sometimes the material they use to pressure treat these can eat away at just standard nails or screws over time, so definitely use some sort of pressure treated fastener when you detach that there. Lastly here, I'm just going to show you because my skids, you can see that my wall, this is not 16 feet, so my wall is going to, you know, start somewhere 4 or 5 inches over there overlapped. And because of that, it's a good idea to have these ties. If I would have built my skids so that the outer edge of the skid was directly on top of the wall, in other words, I was going to frame my wall straight up on top of that, you know, skid, I'd probably be okay. But I wanted to build them in a little bit. So you want to get these little tie downs, and they're just going to come right on here on your joist when you, whoops, I guess I can show you over here on this side since I've got this piece right here. So they'll come in like this and fasten, if I can lift that guy up there, right there. So they fasten in like this. So to tie this piece and this piece, because remember they're going to be overhanging out here a little bit. So you want to try to transfer the load instead of just the two screws that are going to go in there. You want to transfer the load to the entire end beam there, end member. So you want to get these little fasteners and use those all the way along on both sides of your floor there. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to put it back on time lapse and keep going. Okay, so here I've got them all cut, and I'm going to fasten on that runner down there on that end for the face. So what I'm doing here is just marking out all my centers, and I actually drilled these in with screws. You could easily come in here and fasten those with nails, but I screwed each of these in and just lining these all up here, and that's basically all we're doing here in this video. Okay, so I've got both of my sides fastened on here, and now I'm going through and putting all these little ties in. So I just go one by one here, and you can screw or nail these little ties in. So that's what I'm doing here, and then I sort of center everything on my skids in the end to get it just where I want it. All right, just another quick update here. So I've gone through and I've fastened all of these little floor joist hangers all the way down. You can see on all my little 2x4s there. These aren't necessarily for probably a shed this size, but because this edge does overhang from my skid, they say it's a good idea. Also, I live in a fairly high wind area. I do get gusts up to 40, 45 miles an hour occasionally. So I decided to go ahead and bracket those down just to make the floor a little more stable there. So I'm going to show you how these little guys work. I'm going to try to hold the camera with one hand. We'll see how this goes. But they just buckle up under here, and you can see that there's a little spike on that side and that side. So you get a hammer, and you just kind of hammer that and spike that in, and it'll pinch in. Then you can come back with your 4 screws and finish it off or nail it, however you're going to do that. So let's see if I can make one of these work here. So I'm going to try to hold this with my foot. 1 second here. Hold this with my foot from the underside so you can kind of see it. But you just come through and just tack one of those sides in like that. And then tacking the other side. This one I've already done. Let me try that again. So I'm just going to pop this under here and hold it with my foot so I can kind of hold this camera with one hand. You can see a spike right there. You can just give this guy a whack in there, then come back through on the other side. Really can't do this with one hand, but oh, it's not working. Anyway, can't do it with one hand. But you tack that guy in, screw him in, and then you've got all those tie downs there. So the last thing I need to do here before I put my sheeting on is square the floor here. So in order to square this, there's a couple of ways you can do this. One method is doing the 3-4-5 rule, which basically means you come to a corner here and you measure down one corner 3 feet, you measure down the other side here 4 feet, and the cross, the angle from here to there, should be 5 feet. So that's kind of your little Pythagorean theorem there on your right angle. 3, 4, and then that angle right there should be 5. So a squared plus b squared is c squared. So that's one way to do it. I find it a little bit easier just to go from corner to corner. So if you take your tape and you go all the way to that corner and pull it all the way to this corner and take a number. So let's say that's, I don't know, 20 feet. Then you come over here to your other corner and do the exact same thing. Go all the way to that corner, take your tape, pull it all the way to this corner, and those numbers should match. So once those two numbers are exactly equal, that means your floor is in square. So you just need to tap on a corner a little bit to nudge around until you get that in square. Once you have your shed square, you'll want to tie it down so it doesn't move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through this middle skid here, and I'm just going to screw screws through each of those middle floor members all the way down, just to kind of tack that in then on a few of the corners so I know that thing's not going to move at all. And then we'll be ready to lay the flooring. All right, sorry for the shaky video, it's kind of windy. So this shows you kind of what those floor joists look like there in that photo. And then in this little time lapse here, I'm just going through and screwing in all of those middle floor joists down to those skids so that nothing moves at this point, and get it all tied down. And I'm also tying the skids to the little cement piers as well. All right, another quick time lapse here just of laying down here the flooring. Again, this is the tongue and groove stuff. You'll notice that I'm actually laying down a little layer of adhesive, just some simple liquid nails underneath this. That'll help your floor from squeaking. And also you want to either screw or use the rigid nails when you nail this stuff down. Make sure you run your floor lengthwise across your floor joist to give you the most structure, and alternate your rows. And that's what it looked like when we were done. All right, just another quick update here. So we hit the floor all down, and just want to give you a couple quick tips on the floor. So this is the tongue and groove stuff that I used. You can see there's a little tongue right here, and that fits into the groove side, which is on the, of course, other side. The other thing you want to make sure here is when you're doing your sheets, you want to run your sheets lengthwise across your floor beams. You don't want to run them with the floor beams. You get a lot more strength when you maximize the coverage. So right, my floor joists run like this, 60 inches on center, and you want to run that all the way across them. So you do your first row all the way across, and then you want to make sure that you stagger the second row. So you can see here that that's going across. That one's green there because it was the top of the stack there, but that's where my joint is. So this next piece you stagger. So that's an 8-foot piece. That's an 8-foot piece, and my next 8-foot piece goes right in the middle of that joint right there. And then you cut a sheet so that on this end, you can see the line right there. That's a 4-foot piece for me. That's my 8-foot, and then back here over the other side, that's another 4-foot piece. So you want to stagger those seams so that you don't have one big giant seam running all the way down the middle. Okay, that's one tip. Also, another tip is when these tongue grooves are a little bit tricky to get in. So once you've laid down, your second row here, and you're trying to get that groove to fit into the tongue, it's a good idea to just grab a block of wood, and you don't want to get a hammer and just pound on the edge of this tongue, because you'll ding it up just like that, and then your next one won't be able to fit in, and you'll be fighting it the rest of the time. You'd probably have to cut that little tongue off. So get yourself a nice big block of wood. This one's a little bit bigger than 16 inches, so I could set it across 2 rafters. Lay that up to the side like that, and then you can whack on this all you want hard to nudge those tongue and grooves together. So get a big block of wood, pound on the block of wood. That'll keep your edge nice and clean there. You won't ding that all up. Lastly, I did put a little bead of glue down. I just got some of the liquid nails type of adhesive and put that on all my joints, just so that my floor never lifts. Probably not necessary. Also, I used a few screws on each of my boards, so wherever there was a seam, like right here there's a seam, right? I made sure to do a screw and a screw, one there, one in the middle, and then one on the end. The seams are where it can typically lift, where they run along like that. So I did screws there, I did some screws on the outside edges, and then periodically through the middle I went ahead and just did some nails. Now I want to show you this nail, if I can get this to focus here. Maybe that's not going to focus. So this nail is can't really see. I don't know if you can see, but it's not a smooth shank. So you can see down there at the very bottom it's smooth, and then up at the nail it's a little bit ridged. It's got a little bit of a groove in it. Those hold a lot better inside of a floor. There, it's focusing a little bit better, but so you want to make sure to get these sort of textured or grooved nails. Those will keep the, if you're gonna be nailing down your floor, of course, they work a little bit better for floors, because then your floor won't raise. If you have a smooth shank nail, it can slip a little bit and the floor can raise, where these kind of grip into the underlying joist a bit better. So that's a couple tips there. Next we're gonna go back on time-lapse mode while I'm gonna put up this back wall and this wall here. Before I do that, I'm gonna explain a couple of things on just how I'm doing my height and the reason why, and a few things like that. So stay tuned. All right, for this next little video, I'm gonna kind of demonstrate how I determined my wall height. So you can see I've got this 4x8. This is just kind of this OSB siding stuff that has the stamped cedar looking side that's already primed. You can paint later. And it comes in exactly 8-foot sections. And I want that 8-foot section to cover my entire wall, as well as come down. So I need that to, when I lay it up here, I want that 8-foot section to come down and cover up this as well. So in other words, it's got to extend past the bottom here, you know, 3.5 inches, same width as that 2x4, I guess. So if this is a standard wall, right, you have your bottom plate, you have your 2x4s for your studs, and then I'm going to do a double top plate. You can see that I have 92-inch 2x4s, but just a single top plate, that's exactly 8 feet. Now I'm going to have 2 here on the top, a double header plate on the top. You can see that's already too big, so I've got to cut down my 2x4s. So I want it to hang off on the bottom 3.5 inches, and I want also a 3.5 inch gap on the top, because I'm going to have my roof trusses sort of come in like this, and I want that siding to also cover the roof truss. So that's going to kind of sit like this, right? This will be a little bit definitely easier to see when I get the wall up and the siding on. So in other words, I need to cut down my 2x4s so that the overall wall height from the bottom of the bottom plate to the top of the 2 top plates is 92 inches. And that way, that gives me, you can see here on my 8 feet, I've got to cut those down so I have a little bit of overhang with these 2 guys. In fact, I might even need to go more than 92 inches, because I want 3.5 on the bottom and I want 3.5 on the top. So that is 7 inches. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 89 inches is what my 2x4, my wall height is going to be. So it's going to be 7 feet 5 inches, which is plenty high for me. I don't need this super giant tall thing anyway. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut off all my 2x4s so that my overall wall height is correct, and then I'll start framing up a wall and show you how that looks. All right, there's really nothing terribly exciting here. I'm just laying down all of my 2x4s and cutting them all to length for my wall height, and then lay them all out, crown side up, kind of rinse and repeat several times. So I'll just kind of let the footage roll here for a second for the next segment, for the next 20 or 30 seconds. All right, this should make a little bit more sense now that I've cut a 2x4 down. So what I did is I cut my 2x4 exactly at 7 feet. So you can kind of see now, you know, if this is the bottom plate, there's going to be that 3.5, 4 inches right there. It's going to overhang down below there when you lean the wall up to cover that side. And there's 1.5 inches, you know, 2x4 there. Of course, I've got my 7-foot 2x4 right here. And I've got the 2 header plates, which will go right here. And then that gives me also a 3.5 inch space on the top of my siding, and that's where a rafter will come in. So you can see a rafter is going to come in like this. So that siding is going to go up. Of course, it'll be cut at an angle. That siding is going to go up and all the way and cover the rafter. So that's how I decided on my wall height. 7 foot 2x4, inch and a half there. So there's 3 inches, inch and a half on the bottom. There's 4.5 inches. So it's going to be about 7 foot 5 inches for my height, but that way I can just use a single sheet of siding to cover up everything, including that little bottom area right there. So I need to cut off 7.5 inches of or 8.5, I can't remember, off of all my 2x4s. So I just sort of planked them all together like this, and you can just do a gang cut, which is where you cut them all at once. So I just drew a chalk line across there, make sure my end was squared up. I'm going to have my wife stand on that piece of 2x4 so they don't move. Come across with a circular saw and just buzz all those ends off all at once, so then I'm ready to start nailing up the walls. All right, back to time lapse. All right, I've got this one wall all laid out here. It's a similar thing as when you do the floor. You want to lay your 2x4, in this case wall studs, crown side up. So you want the bow, you know, if there's a bow on the board, you want that on the top. The reason being for this, I mean, this of course isn't the floor, so it's not going to sag, but if you put the bow crown up, it'll make sure that your two end pieces, so that makes sure that your two end pieces stay flush on the ground when you're nailing those in. Okay, I found my feet square, just these little guys like this. You see the carpenters use a lot. And these are easy because once you do your marks, you just come in here, you just drop your square like that, and then it's a lot easier if you have both your hands. Then you just come across like this, right, and just do a quick mark like that. So you mark across, do your X, and then you just do that all the way down. I'll show you what that looks like once I get it done. All right, I've marked all these out. So you can see just a line and an X. Line and an X, the 2x4 goes right where the X does. So for example, it would go just like that. So you line all your 2x4s up all the way, and you go ahead and nail it. I do have a little air pressure nailer I'm going to use that I borrowed, but if you don't, you can easily just hammer nail these things together. So I'm going to do this one, lean it up, then I'll do that back one because it also doesn't have any windows. So time lapse mode again. Okay, just another time lapse here of me nailing together this side wall here. I wanted to mention at this point though, I did make a mistake on my second wall. So after I finish this, when I start my other wall, I made a mistake on my measuring. So I did this wall on 16-inch centers, which is correct, but my other wall, remember, it sits in 3.5 inches, and I didn't account for that. I just did 16-inch centers on my back wall as well. So I realized my mistake after I had already built the wall, so I just decided to add 2 extra studs. But just so you're aware, don't make that same mistake. A little bit ahead in the video, I explained the error I made. Okay, this wall and the one opposite this wall is the one I made the mistake on, but you can see I'm laying out the wall here, and I put down all my studs on 16-inch centers, but you have to realize this wall sits inside of that other wall, so there's a 3.5 inch gap. So basically the problem is once I laid this up, all of my studs are no longer on 48-inch centers according to the outside edge. so my sheeting did not land on a stud when I put my sheeting up. So you need to make sure you remember that and account for that 3.5 inches and start your stud on 16-inch centers from that point over. That way your sheeting will always land on 48 inches or 4 feet centers and hit a stud. So to get around the problem wasn't a big deal. I just had to add a couple extra 2x4s in my wall at the end. I actually realized my mistake after I had started to set up the second wall. I didn't realize it here yet, but as soon as I started laying this one out, I realized my mistake right here. But I just decided to continue with it how I did and add the extra studs. But anyway, later on in the video, I think there's another explanation once I have all those walls up to show the issue a bit more clear. And this is the first wall here. You can see that I've run into a window. So I have a window on this side, so I'm framing in the window. And in the next little video here, I explain how those windows are framed. All right, this little video here, I have to do a voiceover on this section because it was so windy. You can see the 2x4 is actually wiggling right there. It was so windy that it didn't pick up my voice very well when I was explaining this originally. So this is just a quick video on how to frame out a window or an opening inside of a wall. So you can see I've got a little 36, I think my window was 36 by 36 inches. So just a couple of things to remember is you still need to maintain your 16-inch on center for all of your studs going all the way across your span, even though there's all these extra 2x4s in here. Make sure you maintain that spacing through your wall. So the basics of a window, or any opening really, it could be a door or anything, is the top plate up here is inside of what's known as a header. So this board right here, you can see at the top of the screen, is a header board, and it's really just two 2x4s with a little piece of, I think it's 5/8 inch OSB is what I used, sandwiched in the middle there. And so you cut that guy to the, the width, and then just hammer it together there, and you can kind of see that. That makes it so that the header board is the same width as your 2x4 stud, so 3.5 inches. So each of these 2x4s is 1.5 inches. That gets you back to 3, and then you need to have a little 1/2 inch piece right there in the middle to get you to 3.5. So that's how you build your headers. Now this is a 2x4 header. Depending on your code or how big your opening is, you may need to do a 2x6 header or a 2x8 header, but this is just a little small opening on a shed. 2x4 is fine for this 36 inches here. Now a little bit of the terminology. There's this outer stud that runs all the way to the top to the bottom, and it's a full-length stud, and that's called a king stud. So the very outer one on the outside edge is a king stud, meaning it's the longest, tallest stud. It's a full-length stud. So you can see it right there. I point to it. And then inside of the king studs, that middle one there, I think they call that a jack stud, and the jack stud goes up, and that's what the header sits on top of. So you can see that, your top plate is going to sit down like that, but your header board sits on top of those jack studs. So the jack studs go down all the way, like so. And then this sill plate right here is what the window, of course, is going to be sitting on. So the sill plate also sits on this left and right little 2x4 that run down to the bottom. And so the sill plate sits on that, and then in between your leftover middle boards they call cripple studs. So those are the two sort of in the bottom of the window opening there, the cripple boards, and those are the ones you need to make sure they still need to be on 16-inch centers as you move along from the outside edge, so your spacing is maintained there. So that's basically how you frame out the window. I think this is me just pointing out again 16-inch centers here when you're doing your windows. I don't have a top gap, so above my window I don't have any area because I built my window all the way to the top of my wall. But if you did have a top gap on the above your header for the window frame, you would also need to put cripple studs on 16-inch centers above, right up there where I'm showing my fingers. But again, since I built mine all the way to the top, I didn't need to worry about that, but you may need to if your windows sit a little bit lower in your wall. So that's the basics of framing out a window. You can kind of just look at the video there and see how that's outlined. Not too tricky. The only other thing I will mention here is that you want to nail all these boards together. So before you nail that sill board to the jack stud, you want to nail the king and the jack studs together, and then nail the sill to the jack so that they're all solid. You don't want to try to go through all three boards with one nail. That won't be sufficiently strong. Also in your window opening, so if you have a 36 by 36 inch window like I do, you want to make your opening 36.5 by 36.5. So you want a ½ inch gap at least, or at least a ¼ inch gap all the way around, preferably even a ½ inch gap around your windows. So you want to build in a little extra room there so you can shim up your window and get it just how you want it. Don't build it exactly the same width as your window. You'll probably never get it in. All right, so here I'm back on time lapse, just kind of now screwing everything together, and then we lean this wall up and tack it down to the bottom. So just more time lapse here. This is all more of the same. You can see that I've stapled down to the sides of my walls just a couple of these 2x4s just to balance my walls so they don't move so much. It's kind of a windy day when I was working here, so I didn't want them rocking all over. So that's what the little two pieces are. Again, it would be better if I would have built this wall second. So I should have built my side walls both first and second on 16-inch centers, and then built my two end walls to account for that mistake I made earlier. This wall has a window and a door opening, so this is my main entrance into the shed. So it's a bit more complicated because it has two different openings, and one of the openings is pretty large where I'm going to be building my double doors. So it took a little bit more framing to get that right, but it's basically the same process. You just frame that all out on 16-inch centers. Quick update here. All four walls are now up. So there's the front. There's a little long window. There's my two windows. Kind of a tip here. You can go to your local glass store, and they usually have like a junk pile of boneyards or their oops pile, the things they made wrong or something. And so I got these two windows for, I think they're $4 per square foot or something. Each one was like 40 bucks or something. So anyway, because it's a shed, I just kind of bought the windows, and then I just built my openings according to the window size. So that'll save you a little bit of money for a shed. So here's the opening here for my double doors are going to hang right here. So you can see this is one of those openings with the header that has the little top pieces nailed up in there. Last thing I need to do here is put on my extra header plates. I'm going to do a double header, and then I've got to determine my rafters, figure out how I want to do those. But one quick mistake I made. I realized this one a ways back, but it was too late to fix. So when I was building my walls, I initially was going to do this back wall first, then I was going to do this front wall, and then lift my sides up in between. But as I was going along, I just said, well, I'll just do the two walls that don't have any windows first. What I didn't do, which is kind of a in hindsight you think, oh my gosh, that was dumb. But on this wall right here, I started building it, and I left myself 3.5 inches because I knew this front wall was going to go in front of it. But my problem is I started measuring my 48-inch centers off of this beam right here. I completely spaced that I was going to have that gap there. So I went from here and did my 16-inch center studs, which now means that my outside, when I come and put my sheeting on, my 4-foot section is not going to land on a stud. So that was really dumb. Don't make that same mistake. Make sure you do your 48 inches on center from the very, very outside of the wall. I actually made that mistake there, so it's not too bad of a fix. I just have to get 2 extra 2x4s, and I'll just throw in an extra 2x4 where the 4-foot hits there and where the 4-foot hits there. So 2 extra 2x4s in there, and that way it'll fix that little problem, but kind of dumb. All right, back to warp speed. Alright, we got all my top plates all put in. Everything's now framed, all the walls are framed. The only really thing to mention here is that when you're doing your top plates, if you do happen to have splices, like I had one right here, you can kind of see that right there, there's a splice. So you want to make sure that your top plate, right, goes to the top. You don't want two splices to sit on top of each other. So just make sure you alternate those if you do happen to have splices, like that are in these two end walls. Kind of see a bit better when the camera this way. So you can see that there was a splice on the bottom right here. So make sure your top plate covers that a good 2 or 3 feet on each side at least. Probably at least over to the next rafter or so. Anyway, that's all done. So now I've got my pile of 2x6s. I'm going to use these for my little rafters. So I was originally going to do 2x4 rafters, but after reading online a little bit, they said that a 12-foot span like I have for a shed, 2x6 is probably a little better idea. So I decided to go with 2x6 on 12-inch center. It'll still work out fine with the way I'm going to do a little top siding, because I'm going to end up cutting those rafters down square. But I'll show you how that works. What we're actually going to do is we're going to use our shed floor here to kind of build this out a little jig, so we can easily just slide in, you know, a rafter on this side, rafter on this side, and then screw them kind of together at the top and make sure our angles are all right. So that is coming up. Right now all the walls are up. Just a time lapse here where I'm starting to put up the siding. This actually goes pretty quick. So you just start throwing up your siding, and what I did is I decided to screw my siding in, and in hindsight I would not have done that. So I don't like the way this particular siding that I bought, when you would screw into it, it would really kind of shred up this stuff and create kind of a little nest, if you will, around the screw heads, which kind of looked ugly, and I didn't like the way it did that in the end. So I would have, you don't actually have that problem. You can see what the floor is made of, that OSB on the floor. The more expensive siding is made of the similar type of stuff, and the screws don't pop out like they did in this cheaper stuff. So I probably would have used nails instead of screws had I known that I was going to shred those little screw holes up so much. Or I could have gone through and pilot holed every single one of my screw holes, which would have been a nightmare. So I would have definitely nailed this instead of screw it. I'm also gluing each of my panels as I'm going. The reason why I decided to glue is just because these panels seemed a little bit cheaper than the other stuff. They didn't seem as sturdy. So I just said, well, I'm just going to throw in some glue so they don't move at all when I get them all screwed in there. So I actually went in with a little sander at the very end before I painted and tried to sand off a few of the little burrs on the screws to make it a little bit better. But yeah, I didn't really like how that came out. So probably nail instead of screw if you have that same type of stuff. In the next little video here, I'll show you how I did. You could do this with one person, but definitely a little bit easier with two, especially if you're working with these full sheets. But just a couple tips there. Right, another update here. So I've got all the siding on. There's all this one side. Kind of want to show you what this looks like. So I've got a sheet laid down here on the ground. You can see there's a little groove in one edge like this, and the other edge has an offsetting groove that just overlaps. You can see that very well, but buckle down into it. So you set your first sheet. This was your left edge of your shed. Or you'd start here, right, and go this way. And then what you do is these things just overlap. So this just overlaps, sits in right like that. And then you just screw that screw in just right here. So you don't need to do screws underneath. You don't need to go through right here, because when you set the second one on top like that, you'll screw in right there through both sheets. So that's kind of how they buckle together. So you'd start with the sheet right here, come all the way to here, put this sheet on top, and then screw through. Both of them or nail. If I happen to screw mine. Probably most people actually nail theirs, but I have these little outdoor screws that are kind of coated. So I just went ahead and screwed it. It was a little bit easier. A lot of people will like to put their siding on before they actually lift the walls up. So while the 2x4 studded walls are on the ground, they'll put the siding on. Working by myself, it's a little bit trickier for me to do because they get really heavy when you get those all on. So I decided to just put the siding on afterwards. Quick tip that just kind of helped out lifting this thing up. So I just kind of made myself a little lever here. So you can see this is because I wanted my siding right, to be right at the bottom there. I don't know if you can see under there. And so this, all I had to do is just, you know, stand on this little 2x4 right here with my foot, and then I could drop a sheet on, and it was, I actually had 2 of these. I had one here and then one there. So I could just put 2 of these little levers, push down right here, and it would lift the wall right up in exactly even with the bottom where I wanted it. And I could screw to the left side and just kind of work your way across. Nothing really fancy there. I just would kind of go one there and then tack one over here to kind of hold both sides, and then screw away. Eventually I'm going to paint over this so I'll be able to see all those little screw marks, because this stuff just comes primed. It doesn't come painted. So the kind I bought is actually a little bit cheaper variety. You can see here on the back that it's just kind of this smooth OSB stuff, as opposed to, you know, your typical OSB sheeting that's like this. They do make this same siding with the back that's like this, and it's actually a lot more sturdy. So if you can, it's also more expensive. It's about 30 bucks a board or something for those. And these ones right here were, I think, 18 bucks a board, a sheet. So I went with the cheaper ones. Because I did end up getting the cheaper ones, I just bought a little bit of that liquid nail glue, and I just ran a little bead as I was putting these up along all the 2x4s on the outside edges. You can kind of see a little glue squishing out there. I mean, that stuff's only like $2 a tube, so I got 3 tubes of that covered 3 or 4 tubes, I think, did this entire thing. So I just locks up the walls a little bit tighter. So anyway, everything's all sheeted there. So we will build the rafters next. Okay, so right here is just a quick little time lapse of how I'm building a quick little jig. So I cut 2 rafters to length with my correct angles, and then measured out, I laid them down and measured out a little gusset on those. But so I'm just laying them down, then I get these 4 little pieces and I tacked those down to the floor, and that way I can just, you know, screw this little gusset in like this, pop the rafter out, and keep going. So what I'm going to do is trace out this gusset. I think they call these gussets, which is, I don't know who names these things. So I'll trace out that on a sheet of OSB, and I need to cut out, I think, 14 of those. Some people just do them on one side. Some people do them on both sides of your rafter beam there. I think I'm going to probably do mine on both sides. And I'll end up doing my rafters 24 inches on center. So that's my next task. I'm not going to video that. It's kind of just a boring, repetitive task. I'm going to cut out a whole bunch of those. And then I'll stick my boards back here in my jig and screw them all together. So that's coming up. All right, so just a quick update on these gussets. So I'm tracing out all these gussets. Now the sheets are 4x8, so I decided to make my gussets 2 feet in width. I don't know if there's some exact measurement you're supposed to do those on. I just kind of made this up, but it seems to work well. So what I did here, I made sure, of course, that my angle there is the same as my roof pitch. I opted for a 512 roof pitch, which is, I think, 22.5 degrees. So anyway, I stuck my template there after I cut out one, and then slide it over, trace it, slide it over there, and that way I can flip it right in the middle. So I'm just trying to minimize my cuts, basically. Flip it like that, trace it, and then it flips back up. Back to 2 on that side. So I don't know if you can see my pencil lines, but there's 1, there's 2, there's 1 upside down, there's 1, there's 2, there's 1 upside down, 1, 2. Anyway, so all the angles match up, so I just have to cut across those lines, and I'm cutting out a whole entire sheet of these things with minimal cuts. So that's kind of how I did that. I think that gives me, I don't know, 13 or something like that of these guys in one sheet. So I'm going to cut these out. The way I'm going to cut them out, I'm going to set my saw so that the depth of my blade is the exact same depth as one of these sheets. I think I got 1/2 inch, and then I'm actually just going to cut that right in place so that I don't have to move it all around. It'll be nice and easy. All right, bye. All right, so I'm cutting my rafters. Again, I'm doing mine out of 2x6. So my method kind of here is I cut the end off my 22.5 degree angle. Now I have a 6'6" rafter. I have a 12-foot span, so this is 6'6" for one side, which is my 512 pitch. And then I slide it down. I measure 6'6" along this top edge, and I cut the second one at the exact same angle. Now, in order to get this one side to sit flash, I then just pull it out, grab your little speed square, and you can just square it up right on that side, and and I'm coming in 4 inches. So I just put this right where my square is, right there at 4 inches on the top. Grab a pencil here, draw a line. So we, whoops, I'm trying to hold the phone and do it at the same time. It's always hard with one hand. So put that on, get that back up there where I want it. Put that on 4 inches, draw a line across, and then that's what I'm going to cut off so it'll sit flat. So once I cut that end off, this of course will be paired with another one, and then it'll sort of look like this. So here's a built one, right? So that edge is going to sit right on top of my top plate, and then this screws in the middle with my little gussets I showed earlier, and then a matching pair on the other side with that also squared off right there. So that's how I'm doing each of my rafters. I have all my middle rafters are going to be these 2x6s, and on the 2 very ends I'm actually going to do 2x4 because I've got to do some boards, right? I've got to put studs, so one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here. So I'm going to build that out of a 2x4 to support that wall, so I'll show that when it comes up. Alright, all my rafters are cut. Now I'm going to start to screw them all together, screw the gussets in. So I built myself this little jig. So basically I laid my first rafter in there and measured the bottom, right? Measured across to make sure it was 12 feet right on from end to end, which is my span there. And then I set these 4 boards and actually screwed them or tacked them into my floor so they don't move. So then I can just drop a board in, drop a board in. Now make sure it's plumb there. Then all I have to do is just drop the gusset on and screw it in, flip it over, screw the other side. The other thing you want to make sure of on this part is you don't want your gusset to go up past that at all. So you definitely want to make sure, probably even drop this down a little less than 1/4 of an inch or something like that on all sides so it doesn't stick up past your rafters at all. And just nail or screw that guy in, and that's how we're going to do these rafters. Alright, my 2 end rafters are up, so this is how I've done those. Those are just studs on 16-inch centers, just like the walls, except I put one right in the middle. So you can kind of see that they all have the 22.5 degree level, and I just nailed them all in like so. And try to go slow so I don't get dizzy. There's one more over there, and same thing. So the way I kind of built those is I actually did the very middle 2x4 and the 2 little tiny inks right here on the floor. So I just laid them up against one of my pre-built 2x6s, and then just laid that 2x4 here along the top edge, right all the way up there. Measured down my little gap right there for my little 2.5-inch block or whatever, and measured the exact middle right here all the way up to the very top down to the bottom. So I cut that middle piece, I cut the little 4-inch blocks on the end, and then I screwed those blocks in. So I screwed those in, lifted it up on the wall with just the end pieces, and then I just cut all the rest of them separate length for each side, like so. And toenailed those all in. So now I'm gonna pull a string. So we're gonna pull a string line from the middle of this one all the way over to the middle of this one, and that'll make it easy so we can lay out the rest of the rafters on 24 inches and get those peaks right where they need to be. Alright, I am ready to cut out my windows here. I'm waiting for some help to do my rafters. I have to have some help to lift those up. So in the meantime, I'm gonna cut out these windows. So you can see that I just put my little outside sheeting right over the top of my windows. I didn't cut them out ahead of time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm coming through, and I just did a little drill mark in each corner. As you can see, there's a little drill right up here in this corner, little drill mark. So I just drilled through little teeny tiny holes in each 4 corners. And then on the outside edge here, all you do here is just tack in a quick nail. So in each of my drill marks, I tacked in a little teeny tiny nail. Then I just pull a string line, just wrap it around each of those nails, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then just snap off that window. So that's where that window's gonna go. And then I'm gonna come in with my skill saw again, just set my blade length to the same width as this sheeting here. I think it's 7/16 or something. And then I'll just go ahead and just buzz those out, saw the 4 corners. And that window will all pop right out exactly measured up. So that's what I'm gonna do next. So I've got a little handheld battery skill saw, which makes this a little bit nicer, but you just come through and buzz these edges. I came with a little saw here, you can see, to clean up those corners so I didn't tear them out. And then just cut those out and pop out the windows, and then you should have a perfectly cut window right where it needs to be. So this is a lot easier, I think, than cutting out those gaps ahead of time. So here we're now ready to put up the roof rafters. So I've got some help here. My wife and my boy came over to help me lift these guys up. So all we do here is we're just lifting all these guys up and tacking them on as we go. Now you can see this little board kind of sticking out of the rafters as I'm going here. And it's kind of a windy day, and so I live kind of in a windy area, so I didn't want these guys really, shaking around. So I kept this little stringer board going out on my 24-inch centers, and I would just tack that into each rafter as I went, so that they stayed solid and didn't move around until I could get my sheeting up on the roof and tie it all together. So that kind of worked really, really well for me, just that little teeny tiny runner along those rafters, tacking that down as I went. So here we're just hoisting up the sheets of roofing that's just regular OSB and tacking those down. And really, once you get that OSB tacked down on the roof with a few nails and screws, everything, you can feel the entire shed just really kind of become solid. So you start tacking down those on the roof and everything just tightens right up. So that's what I'm doing here. It's the same process as when you're doing the floor. You want to make sure you just do your two long pieces overlap as much as you can, so do them lengthwise, and then never have a splice going up on your second row. So you got to alternate your splices as you're doing your roof sheeting as well. Just a couple of stills here when the roof was going on. You'll also notice that I overhung my roof about, I think it was 3.5 inches, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to put a piece of trim underneath there to have a little overhang on the sides. So that's why I overhung that just a little bit on each side coming down. So the next little piece here is going to be a quick update on painting. So once I got my roof on, I finished off my siding, put the little Z channel in, and then started to paint. Okay, and a quick update here. So I have just finished painting. The shade I chose is actually just a little bit darker than that original prime, so it probably looks about the same. So I've got everything painted here. Got all my trim cut and painted a little bit lighter. Almost looks white here on the video, but it's kind of a super light brown. And I just wanted to show quick this little Z track that I put in. So you can see right there, right along the middle where there was a seam before, I put this little metal Z track. And that's just supposed to help with water, so that if water runs down here from the top, it won't seep down into the top of that board right there. So their little Z track will come out and run down there and run down this wall all the way to the ground, is the idea. So this is what this little Z track stuff looks like. It's just a little metal piece like this. It's kind of bent in a Z, and you just slot it up in there like so, and that's it. So I put that on each of my ends. I don't necessarily even think that's necessary, because I'm going to put a piece of trim across that, so the trim would probably serve the same purpose. But it was only like, I don't know, $3 or $4 for a 10-foot piece, so it was only $8 or $9 to do both ends, so I decided to throw it on. So the last little piece I wanted to show here is how I'm going to end up doing my little overhang. I know I've mentioned this before, but I had this little gap underneath there. You can see where the top of my siding doesn't quite hit the top of the roof, and that's because I was initially going to do 2x4 studs for my ceiling rafters, right? But I ended up doing 2x6s at the last minute, just because I thought it'd probably be a little bit better. So I didn't have this nice, didn't go all the way to the top like I had originally planned for when I cut out my wall heights and everything. So not a big deal, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a little piece of this OSB, the same stuff I sheeted the roof with, just a little, basically a 3.5-inch strip. And I've got this little piece here to kind of show you how this will work. So this is going to come up under, one second here, come up under like that. So that's my little strip that's going to go on the bottom. And then I'll just have a little, I'm gonna rip one of these things are 3.5 inches. I rip it right in half, and that gives me a piece that's gonna go right here on the face to cover that up. And then of course my drip will go over the top of everything in the shingles. So that's what I'm gonna do, and you can see that actually cleans up the gap there in the middle, so you can't see the gap anymore as well. So I'm gonna rip a little sheet, and then I'll tack this on and show you what that looks like. Okay, just finishing up here some of the trim. You can kind of see how it looks here on the edge there. I'm gonna come down, of course, both corners, 4 corners as well. And here's how I'm kind of doing this one edge here. So I've already showed how I did underneath here. So I just took one of those 3.5 inches and ripped it right in half. I actually don't have a table saw, so I just did it with the skill saw, but then you can see I'm just tacking that right in like that. I've glued behind these, and I'll come back and put a couple screws to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. But and that'll fit right there, and my rain gutter is going to eventually come over and come to about right here. So that's how that'll kind of finish up and look along the edges. All right. So just another time lapse here. I'm just putting up the trim here on the underside. You can see I'm using these clamps. One part that was just to help me hold it up while I drilled, but also I was drilling from the bottom up, and it kept pushing up the roof. So well, I should have pre-drilled these holes, and I would have eliminated that problem, but that's why I'm clamping there, is just to kind of hold that tight while I drilled in from the bottom there and tighten those up. And not a lot to see here. We're just going through and measuring, cut the trim, measure, cut trim, measure, cut trim, and putting that all around the edges here. So we'll just let this roll. Okay, most of the trim is done. So in this video, I'm coming through with the roof, what's this, tar paper. So the underlayment, the tar paper. So I've come up here and I'm just laying down the tar paper and tacking that all in place. And you want to have your tar paper done before you start doing your rain gutter, or I guess drip edge is what I'm doing here. So I'll kind of show you a couple tips on this drip edge, because there's a couple of gotchas on, some goes under and some goes under the tar paper. Okay, we're back at it here. And I have got all the felt paper on the roof here, and I've also got 3/4 of the trim on, or not the trim, the rain gutter. That's going to hang down like so. Just a couple of little reminders. When you're doing your, I'm going to stand up on this ladder so you can see, when you're doing your rain gutters, your drip edge, whatever you want to call those, there's a little drip edge here. The eaves, so the gable ends right there of the house, for your shed, I guess, the felt paper goes underneath the edge of your drip edge, and down here on the straight edge, the felt paper goes over the top. And that's so water, you know, can run over here and drain off. And then it's on the side there, in case you have hard weather where you have rain coming in at like a sharp angle like this. You don't want that rain getting in between the felt paper and shingles and running down your wood roof. So you put the drip edge on top of the felt paper so that if you do have a driving rain that's sort of sideways, it'll come on top and still run down the edge of your thing off the edge of the roof. So that's how you do your drip edges. Just make sure also when you're rolling out your felt paper, you start on the bottom edge and work your way towards the peak. That way you always have an overlapping piece on top so the water can drain down on top. And then once you get on the top, you loop this over and you start on the back side and work your way up this way so that that top crown piece overlaps both edges, so the water always runs down and never underneath the piece of paper. So now we've got this up, we're ready to do, I'm gonna snap some lines here. I'm not gonna use these lines on the felt paper because mine are a little bit off. I didn't get so close, so I'll snap some chalk lines, show you how that works, and we'll start to roof. Last thing before we do that is I'm gonna take you over here and show you how you do a corner. So on your drip edge, you can see the corner there has a nice little curve to it. So you just always want to make sure you overlap a couple of inches. And to do a corner, you just snip a little teeny piece right here at the bottom. You leave this piece whole, and then you snip all the way across the top from the back. And you can see now, I've got this one already pre-snipped, but you can see, watch just how easy this bends. Oops, let me get that. There we go. So then you just bend that corner in like that, and that's how you do your corners. And then you can just tuck that up under, make sure to keep your felt paper on top or underneath, however you're doing your corner. Then you have a nice little corner like so. And that's how you do the corners. On your drip edge, to do the eaves, or not the eaves, rather the points up there, it's actually a lot easier. You just do one snip in the middle. So once you're doing your top piece, you actually just snip right here, right across there, and then it'll just fold down and fold down. So anyway, we'll put her back on warp speed and then give you an update when we're starting the roofing, the shingles. So here I set the camera up on time warp again, and just coming up through here, and I'm actually snapping chalk lines. I think I did every 5 inches here. In the end, once I actually did my first couple of rows, those lines that were on the felt paper were actually pretty much right on. So after a couple of rows, I stopped using the chalk lines and just eyeballed it according to those lines, and it came out just perfect. So while it helped me get started here, I didn't end up using the chalk lines the rest of the way through the roof. So what I'm doing here is just laying down the starter row. So I laid down a starter row of shingles, then my first row of shingles, and then you kind of work your way into a corner like this. So you work a corner all the way up, and then that allows you to kind of sheet all the way across before you have to do another corner. So you can see I'm doing 3 or 4 rows at a time. That way I can reach basically as far as I can on the ladder, and I'm able to do a large portion without getting on the roof. So that's kind of why I'm doing that there. So you kind of start from a corner, work your way over, and then that's how you do it. So you can see here, just building up a corner, and it's just kind of rinse and repeat here. This is the opposite side of the roof now. So doing the same thing, start at a corner, 3 or 4 rows tall, then you work your way across, work your way across, work your way across. So just a lot of repetitive stuff here. If you can, you want to definitely shingle at night or in the morning, because if it's in the middle of the day and it's hot, that tar on the shingles really heats up, and they are really sticky. They're really hard to get apart. And more importantly, when you walk on it a lot like you do when you're roofing, it'll really tear up your shingles when they're hot. So if you can do it during a cool part of the day, definitely do that. So anyway, let's let this time lapse roll, and then I do a couple explanations here in the next video on how to do your starter strip for your shingles. And we've got it all roofed up all the way to the top. We're just about ready to set our roof caps. And we've got this side done as well. So I just wanted to go over a couple of quick things. I didn't really do any videos on roofing, but it's not all that difficult. So the only kind of thing you need to do with roofing is you always start with what they call a starter strip, which is this little half of a shingle. So you take a full shingle and you cut it off so all the tabs are cut off, and you end up with just this half shingle. And you want to keep the starter strip on it. And the reason why you want to do that is because you'll start with this starter shingle as your very bottom row with the glue right down towards the edge. and that helps glue the first edge down so that it doesn't flap up in the wind. So you stick a starter strip as your very first row like that. Of course, you'll have a whole set of these, and you just... Okay, so you take that starter strip and you just run it as your first row all the way down. Some people like to overhang it 1/4 of an inch past your drip edge, and same thing on the sides. I kept mine fairly simple, and I kind of just kept it right on the edge here of my drip edge and side, and I overhung maybe just 1/4 of an inch on the end there. So once you have that first row all the way done, then you start with your first shingle row. So the way you want to do your shingles is, to make it easy on yourself, is you kind of do a staggered pattern like this. So you start on your very left edge over here. If you started with your starter rows and went this way, you need to make sure that you cut your starter row off so it doesn't have either your starter row or your first full shingle. So you never want two seams like this. You never want a seam to overlap on your starter row seam. So what you can do is you can just take a full shingle like this. So shingles are typically 36 inches wide and 12 inches tall. So you take a full shingle and you just cut this first tab right in half. Now on shingles, it's kind of handy because they have these little slits. You can see it's right there. There's a little teeny slit. You can see that there's a slit there, and there's a slit there. So they make it fairly easy to show you how to cut those in half. So what you do is you just grab your speed square. If you go from the back edge, it's really, really easy to just snap off. So you just put your square down. All you have to do is score line. You don't have to cut all the way through the shingle. So you just score line on the back, flip it over. Mine's kind of a smaller square. Score line up, and then you just fold the shingle like so. You just fold it and it'll just snap right off on that line. And that's what you start with for your first full row. So you start with the full row on top, and then your second one you cut off right there. So you cut off right on the rain gutter. That's the next 6 inches. So each of these tabs are 12 inches roughly. So you cut that one off, then you go back here and you cut it off right there. That's your third row. You cut it off right there. That's your fourth row. And you never want to go with less than a 6-inch piece. So you never cut off a little 6-inch piece like that and start with that. So the minimum size that you're going to start with is 1 full tab. So once you do that, it'll allow you to start laying out your shingles, and you'll just kind of see this staggered pattern like so as you're working your way along the roof. And it makes it really easy to, just keep sending your shingles to the right, and not a big deal with that. And once you get to the end, you just cut them all off flush on the end. Save your little end pieces because you can use those possibly as ridge caps, or they might flip-flop and fit on the other side of the roof. But that's pretty much it. So you just keep working that pattern all the way up, always making sure that you never overlap, and you should have a line there, and your next row should be there, and then solid there, solid all the way down. So that's how you do your roof. And then once you get to the ridge caps, you just use your shingles to cut those. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. All right. Okay, I'm making my ridge cap pieces here. So the ridge caps, as mentioned before, are just used with your scrap shingles or full shingles. It's just one 12-inch length that just kind of loops over the ridge of the roof there. And to make those, you just get all your scraps and you just score down. So you come into that rain slot right there, which is right here. And you just kind of score in, come down here and score in. And you just break these guys off like so. Break that one off, break this one off, and then that's what the back side of the ridge cap looks like. So you have your full 12-inch piece right there, and it's kind of tapered down to the corners. You don't have to, there's no science behind this scoring. You can just kind of score in, taper those in. The reason why you taper those is when you start laying these guys up like so and like so, you maintain your 5-inch reveal, which is the same as all your shingles. So you kind of go along your ridge like this, right? Same with your nails, nailing all the way. But when you taper those edges in, it'll just help those, it helps them lay over more flat, and you don't have all these big bulky edges along the edge. You just have a nice finished edge. So that's why we kind of taper those down. So you make a whole ton of these, and then you take them all up in your roof and just sort of staple them across. So I'll show you that once I have that process underway. Okay, the roof is all the way to the ridge. So you can see I've got my shingle underneath here, curled over the top, and then this one here curls over the top. And then the little roof caps we made start on top of that. So you get a roof cap, and all you have to do is just kind of make sure that you have a glue edge here and a glue edge here, because your roof cap's going to wrap like that, so it can get glued down on both sides. You just start at one end, make sure you maintain a similar size. I don't have 5 inches on each side, but I don't care. And then you just work your way back all the way to the end. So just piece by piece by piece. So I'll get going and show you what that looks like in a second. Alright, so on this little last piece here, when you get all the way to the end, you'll of course have a little end piece. So what we did is on our last piece, I just cut back the edge a little bit to reveal the tar here and the tar on the other side. And you just cut one little shingle like so. And then this is your last 5-inch piece. It'll sit just like that. And you're gonna have to use tar always, but I'm just gonna tack on this top side. So I'll put a nail there, and I'll put a nail there, and the tar will grab it on the bottom. And you'll come back with some tar glue and just go over the top of those 2 last nails. The only other thing to mention on here is that you want to face your ridge cap the opposite way your wind blows. So in my case, wind usually blows this direction. It kind of blows everywhere here. Blows this way. So you want your ridge caps, right, to all curl like this. So the wind blows over the top of them like this, and it doesn't catch underneath your edge here. And we're done. So that's the entire roof. Looks pretty good. Happy with the way it came out. Okay, quick update on how I'm building my doors here. So I've got a 71-inch span from left to right, and it's 7 from top to bottom, like so. So I'm gonna have some double doors built in here. They're gonna, open out and open out. So this is how I'm kind of doing those. So I'm saving a 1/2 inch on each side of my doors for hanging them. So let's say each door is gonna be 35 inches wide. So this is how I built it. I just a couple 2x4s framed in there like this. So from here to here would be 35 inches. Same thing on this door, just flipped upside down. But you can see how I did that. I just did some pocket hole screws right here on the bottom side. You can't see them, so I pocket holed each of those 4 corners and then just screwed down that sheet. And this is what it looks like flipped over. So instead of having each door 35 inches exactly, I'm doing one door 36 inches and one door 34 inches. That's going to give me an inch overlap in the middle so that I can cut this bottom, this facing, it's the same siding as this is, just upside down. I can cut this facing an inch wide on my short door and an inch short on my long door. That way they're going to overlap in the middle, and they'll have something to butt up against when the 2 doors are closed. So the seam, in other words, the seam's going to be right exactly at 35 inches. So it'll look like the 2 doors are equal widths, but really in reality, one's going to be 34 and one's going to be 36. I know that doesn't really make sense right now, but once I get this cut out and hung, I'll be able to show you exactly how that works. All right, I'm getting ready to hang my doors. So what I did is I fastened on my front panels here. You can see how there's my overlap there where the one door is going to be on the other door. And what I did is I actually just got a couple of blocks here. This is the same trim block that I used here, and I just laid down a couple of those. And then I set my doors up in and then pushed them against the wall and then snapped a line all the way along the outside edges. And then I just set my little handheld skill saw here. You can use the inner skill saw. So its blade depth was the same width as one of these sheets, so I didn't cut into my 2x4 here. And then just buzzed along my snap line to get to cut out the exact perfect width of my 2 doors on my opening there. So now they'll fit into there. So that's how I did that. You could cut that out ahead of time, easy enough as well, but I just decided to kind of build the doors and push them up so I can get them exactly where I wanted, as I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to do that part when I was building my opening. So on the bottom here, you can see I actually originally took some sheets and I filled these all the way across, but I changed my mind just barely. So I took those couple of little filler pieces off, and I've decided just to extend my door down. So you can see that my door, the facing here, the siding extends down. So I I just snapped a line along the bottom when I had them sitting up there, and then just cut off those pieces there so that my bottom of my door will perfectly cover that when it's closed as well. So that's how I decided to do that, so it'll all fit in there snug. So now I'm going to hang the doors. So the same thing, I'm going to leave those blocks there, and I'm going to set the doors, these 2x4s, right, that are built down here. They're going to, that's the top end actually, but they'll sit right on top of those blocks. I'll line them all up, and then put on my trim and hinges on the outside edge and show you kind of how all that works now that they're all built. Most of the trim up on the 2 doors, and I'm just got them blocked in place like this, hold themselves in right now because I don't have the I bought the wrong hardware. Well, I didn't buy the wrong hardware. I'm gonna change out my hinges. Instead of the long triangle pointy ones that go over like this, I'm just gonna buy the standard hinges. But that's how that looks. So you have to have the trim on before we put the hinges on, because the hinges go right here and right here on the outside of the trim. So that's coming up next. So in the meantime, I'm going to flash these windows and then hang these 2 windows I got. So I just got this little tape here I bought. It's just this dew point. It's this waterproof sort of tape I'm going to use. So if rain ever, rains down, I don't want rain to get between here and here. So I'm just going to take a strip of tape and just flash this around like that, up all the way around this door opening here, or this window opening, and then I'll set the window in it, and that's going to be good enough for me for right now. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll show you what it looks like when I have that taped up. All right, the windows are finally in here. So I just want to show you what I did. I put that little flashing tape on the inside. There's actually a better flashing tape that's better than this. It's silver, and it kind of molds a little bit better. So I'd recommend getting that. I went to the store, when I went to the store to get the guy, anyway, I couldn't get any help, and I couldn't find any, and it was kind of a joke, so I just bought this. So yay, Home Depot. Anyway, what you want to do is flash the inside of the window, put the window on. You don't need to redo the sides. I just put one more strip on the sides here, nothing on the bottom. But you do want to do a strip on the top. So once you have your window set, then you do one more flashing strip on the top, because that'll help any moisture drain down out on top of the window instead of behind it. So you do need behind the window, you need to flash at least this way, and then in front of the window, you need to flash on top there. So that's how you do those windows. Also pay attention, I hadn't realized, but when I hung this door initially, these little leech marks right here, so there's a little tab on your window. You can see one right there and one right there cut out of the little plastic there. Those are weep marks. They let water drain out, so if water ever seeps down from a rain into the window, into this channel here, it'll roll over and then seep out here eventually. So you definitely want those on the bottom. When I initially put those in, I accidentally had those on top, so I had to unscrew it, pop it out, and flip it around. So I'm just gonna put my trim around this window and show you when that's done. Also in this video, I'm gonna show you the doors are finished. I've got my second window over here also hung in there as well, and taped up and flashed on top. So my doors are now finally in place. I've got my 3 hinges. So I just bought this little 3-pack of hinges at the hardware store. I'm actually missing, I ran out of 3-inch screws, so I need to finish this side off. But there's my hinges. So if you remember, inside of this door panel, there's a 2x4 that goes across like that. So I tried to put my hinge where that 2x4 went here. Then same thing at the bottom. You'll notice it's up a little bit from the. So same thing down here at the bottom. I placed that hinge up a little bit because there's that 2x4 rail, if I remember, on my door that goes like that. So I extended my door down. You can see here when I open this, I extended that bottom piece all the way, so I made made sure my hinge hit the bottom of the door there. So that's what it looks like when it's open. I went and painted this back here because I just had some extra paint. So you can now see what that, that's why we built in that extra inch on this side, so it would overlap there and give a little bit nicer finish when it was closed. And then same thing on the top, because that hooks in right that top inch right there. And then you remember this side over here has that extra inch that overlaps on this door. So, and then this door has that Same inch there, same inch there. So it works really nice. So these doors swing open. I can swing them both open nice and wide. And this one you just close up. The last thing I have to do here, I haven't finished yet because I don't have those screws, but I'll come on the inside and fasten one of those little just things that you can screw that go down into the floor here, so I can lock that into the floor there, and then lock it up into the header here. So this door, will remain immobile, and you'll just be able to open and close this door unless you need to get something big out. Of course, then you can unhook those little latches and open both doors. So as far as the fastener, the one I went for, I just bought these two little handles in black, and the fastener, I just got one of these guys that just hooks on both sides of the door, latches like that, and then I can throw a little padlock or something if I want down in there to lock it up. The also nice thing about this is that it hides the screws when it's closed, so somebody couldn't come unscrew those screws and just pop off your doors. Now you still have that problem over here. Of course, they could always unscrew the hinges. Excuse me. I just got done sawing a board and I'm allergic to sawdust, so it makes me sneeze. So anyway, they could always unscrew your hinges. So if you really want to get paranoid about it, I'm not all that worried. But you would just screw all the way through to the back side of the door and then bolt on just one. You really only need to go on one. So on one of these holes, just bolt. On this side, bolt. I would do one on the top, 2 bolts, one on the bottom, 2 bolts on each door. That way, even if they could unscrew, the front side, they could never get the back of the bolt off. They couldn't pop your doors off if you're worried about safety. If someone's really going to go to that much length to try to steal stuff out of your shed, they're probably just going to cut the bolt, break the glass out of the window. So, of course, I'm not worried about it. But if you did want to prevent that, that's what you would do, because the hinges are on the outside of the doors here instead of the inside. Anyway, that's pretty much it. The last little pieces I have to do are on the end here of the shed. I've got to install the vent up at the top so that it vents out the hot air. So I've got to cut out a little square up here and install that little teeny tiny vent. I'm going to do that on both ends, this end and the other end of the shed, so I can get some cross ventilation up there. I'm probably not going to video that, so not that interesting. You just take up your little vents, trace them out. That's what they look like. Right, just little vents. They have a little screen on the back so that bigger things can't climb in there. Take that up, trace it out, and just cut a little piece out of your siding like everything else and screw that guy in. So I've got to place one of these on each end and then finish up my trim. So I've got to trim around the windows, put my header trim across there, and then I'm pretty much done. Just a few little touch-up things. I'll build some shelves or whatnot on the inside, but I'm not going to show all that. Mostly it was just to showcase the build of the shed, kind of document it mostly for my sake, as I kind of went on and made things up and made some mistakes and whatnot, but it was a fun project. I'll show you what the inside looks like. So there's the inside of the shed. I'll probably end up building maybe the big shelf up here to kind of have a 2 or 3 foot shelf and some side storage and whatnot. Here's all my tools and junk, but that's what it ended up. So it's 12 by 16. I think it's ended up being 192 square feet, which for my area, you can go up to 200 square feet for a shed without a building permit. So it's kind of nice. You just have to worry about your setbacks. So I just decided to make it fairly large so I could enjoy it and store some space out here. Store some stuff in the space. So hope you've enjoyed this little sort of build video with me. And maybe I'll post a little update once I get some of that interior stuff done on the shed. My least favorite thing, painting. I hated the painting, especially the trim. So painting the outside wasn't that bad because I actually do have a little paint sprayer that was loaned to me. But painting the trim was my least favorite part. Shingling the roof was kind of a pain, but I actually enjoyed it because I've never fully shingled a roof, and I really like how the roof turned out, so I enjoyed that part. My favorite part was probably I don't know, probably the roof actually. No, probably the doors. I'm really happy with the way the doors turned out, so they're probably my favorite piece. piece of it, building those little doors. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it. See you later. Right, likely the final video here. So just wanted to show you I did my couple shelving in here. So I built myself a little sort of workbench. Underneath here, I'll sort of work on that's about 36 inches from the ground. It's pretty good height for a work area. And then some shelves over here. So for this top one, I just got a 2x6 that spans my entire 12 foot. It's just a 12 foot 2x6. And then I just nailed the block in right to the stud there. Measured 5 inches down and nailed that in. Then the same thing over on this side, right? Just nailed a little block right into the stud so that my 2x6 could sit right in there. And then I just ripped down a piece of this OSB so I can have a nice sort of, not necessarily a attic, but you get the idea here. Big storage area up here on top. I'm gonna cut this little piece right here. Then I built 2 shelves down here that are about 20 inches each that are gonna go right here and here. So I just wanted to show you how I did these shelves. So I just cut a bunch of 2x4s at, I think I did 20 inches, just whatever length makes you happy. Just tack those right into your stud. And then you just cut another little brace piece and you just 45 degree that angle, 45 degree that angle, and then just brace that up into there. So that's how I tagged all those on. They're super sturdy. You can pretty much hang on those and sit on those. So 3 or 4 across there. Every other stud is about where I put one, and that gives me some room to build some shelves with some bigger storage area up top. I may end up doing the same thing over here. I may end up putting maybe even 2, maybe a 2x6 going here and a 2x6 going here, so I can do a full 4 foot sheet up there all the way across to have another attic space to store stuff up above if I want to. But that's how I did my little shelves on the sides, and same thing over here with my little workbench as well. So that's how it's turned out. A little bit later and I'll start filling it full of all my junk. All right, thanks.